Well, I think we're live. Hello, everybody.
Oh,
Welcome, and great to see everybody. I'm just going to do a few quick introductions. We've just been having a little bit of a laugh, actually, about so many different things. Against the tragedy, I've got to say, if anyone's a soccer fan, the huge, hideous tragedy of England's performance this evening, which we won't, we're not going to go there into too much detail just yet, because I think Mark being from the UK as well, Mark and I were traumatised. So, with no further ado, Sean Mahon of Successfully Social. For those of you that are joining me again, it's a great pleasure to see you again. For those of you new to the show, really welcome. Thank you very much for joining the stream. Great to see you. I'm also joined by the inimitable, if I could just say the word, inimitable Sandra Watson. Sandra, as always, is my left-hand, right-hand man, woman. So it's great to see you, Sandra. Thank you very, very much for joining me. And Mr. Mark Cosemo of Tomorrow's Consultant. And many of you will have met Mark before, hopefully, on an earlier episode. That was probably about 7 or 8 weeks ago, where Mark focused on leadership and coaching in a very specific context, which was healthcare. And what we had was a really good discussion and debate, which was very, very popular. But as a result of Mark speaking about a particular niche, it was felt that Mark could well come back and focus on leadership and communication in a broader context. And Mark's been gracious enough to actually agree to do that. So a very long, very short introduction there. Probably took me about 2.5 minutes. But we're going to roll our sleeves up now and welcome everybody, as I say. So, Mark, you've been up to some really, really interesting stuff lately, haven't you? And I wonder if you could just tell us how you are and what you've been up to, Mark.
well, thank you for inviting me back, Sean. I'm absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I've just come back from a short walking holiday in the north of England, or rather, just south of the Scottish border. So I've had a couple of days of glorious sunshine up there. That's been absolutely brilliant. And prior to that, I've been travelling a lot with work. So I've been working a lot in Europe and also in the Gulf states. I was out in Saudi Arabia a couple of weeks ago, so which is a real culture shock for a Brit. Not apart from anything else, it's 42 degrees and bone dry. You know, there's no humidity at all. Well, that you would notice. So a little Englishman like me just frazzles to a crisp in no time whatsoever. So yeah, lots of travelling, lots of work, and then topped it off with a walking holiday at the end of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I know it'll come as a great surprise to a lot of people, but yeah, rarely, I think, Mark, in the UK, do we ever come anywhere remotely close to 42 degrees, let alone 32 degrees. Now, what would that be in Fahrenheit? Because obviously we've got an awful lot
Double it and add
of
30. So what's that? 84 plus 30. So what's that? 114, something like that. 114 Fahrenheit.
114 Fahrenheit, which of course, Sandra, is the usual temperature for where you are in Denver, isn't it?
No, but it's an average temperature this time of the year for Las Vegas.
Is it?
Oh, of course, it's in the middle of the desert, isn't
it? Phoenix, and Phoenix,
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, you know what? But lovely to see you, Sandra, and tell us a bit about your week, actually, before we get into the contents. How have things been with you?
They've been marvelous. Things have been good. Busy. You know, it was funny. Yesterday on another Hangout on Air, someone said, when you're on a Hangout on Air, like we are today, Mark and certainly Sean, when you go out in real life, then IRL, does anyone recognize you as being a celebrity? And I said, out in real life, who's ever out during the day after you're on social media?
Very true.
So I realized, you know, my week's been great. I'm in a cubbyhole. I went back to cube living.
You know, it's really funny you say that, Sandra, because I do wonder, and I better be careful how I put this, but clearly for all of us, one of the big benefits of doing Hangouts is we've all got clothing on up to here, but who knows what's happening below the screen? It's always fun. Maybe I shouldn't have gone down that path, because people are coming in here looking to have a discussion about leadership, and I guess we need to get back onto to that track. And Mark, I did have a conversation. Thanks, by the way, for that, Sandra. It's good that you're both well. we did have a chat in the green room beforehand about the sort of people that are joining the show. Now, certainly from the stream, we've got a mix of people who are business owners, entrepreneurs, who have got an interest in leadership, but we've also got people who are in leadership roles as employees, and we've got a couple of authors, and I think we've got some people that have just moved into self-employment, having been in corporate life previously. So clearly we've got quite a mix there. So Mark, thinking about that sort of audience and thinking about what you've just discussed, you were talking, Mark, I think, about a lot of international travel lately. Is that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, yes. And it's fascinating how, despite the fact, it's the similarities and the differences that are really interesting. So it's the cultural differences, and we were laughing earlier about some of my experiences with very different cultures, where you know, often as a trainer you go out there and you try the same approach because it's worked for you before, but then you come across these very different cultures and you have to learn to adapt things. And then despite all of that, there's the similarities. There's the fact that despite there's these huge cultural differences, you get great similarities in terms of the challenges that people are facing, whether they're in corporate life or whether they're you know, starting up on their own or thinking about starting up on their own. Same challenges, you know, same problems. So as a coach, I quite often, you know, I'm being asked to help people with very similar things, which revolves around giving them greater confidence to be brave enough to do what they want to do, you know, and helping them to work out the way that's right for them. You know.
Right. Okay, Mark, and that's really interesting. And for the audience that we've actually got, can you break that down a little bit more? So if you were to kind of think of, well, let me rephrase the question, because I know that you do a mixture of training where you've got group audiences, but you also do one-on-one coaching and smaller coaching where you've got more specific time with individuals. So there's perhaps different nuances to both of those things. But if we think of the reasons why, I think you mentioned you've just been to one of the Gulf states recently. What sort of things are you doing there to an audience in terms of training, and what are you noticing in terms of their particular requirements? And also, how does that differ to what we might see in the US and in the UK?
Well, what's really interesting about if we generalize about the West, including, you know, so I would include the US and Western Europe as being very, very similar. There are some subtle differences as you go there, but it's really, I was telling you that, you know, when I've run a training course across Europe and I've had no problems. One trick that we do as trainers is we love to, you know, schedule a training course to finish at, say, 5 p.m. or something like that, knowing that we can probably finish 15 minutes or 30 minutes early. When you do that with a German audience, and this isn't, I'm not being funny about Germans, it's, you know.
No, hang on, we've got 4 Germans in the audience mostly. Very, very careful.
But they take the timings on the agenda very, very literally. So if it says it finishes at 5, they expect to finish at 5. And whereas an English audience would turn around and say, "Oh, great, we get to go home early," the German audience would turn around and say, "No, we need to stay and finish." So there's that aspect at one end of the spectrum, and then at the other end of the spectrum, I was asked to design and run a 3-day introduction to selling for engineers for a very large multinational engineering firm. And what was really interesting about that was I said, well, 3 days. I said, that's really going to be dragging it out, because they expect to start at 8 in the morning and they finish at 4, and you've got all the local customs and stuff like that.
Sorry to jump in, Mark. This being an engineering firm based in the Gulf, was that the case, or?
Yeah, sorry, this was based in the Gulf. Yeah. So it was an Arabic audience, very, very different. All spoke English, no problems. But I spoke to a colleague who'd been out there and said, "Wow, 3 days, that's gonna really drag on a little bit." He said, "No." He said, "Just design a 2-day course, because it will take you 3 days to run it, because their perception of time is incredibly different." Right. Okay. And what was really funny, just going back to the question that you asked me, was that when I was out there, I was doing some negotiation skills with a company out there, and they were asking me about negotiating with companies in the West, and with the US in particular, and they were having difficulties, and it was this culture clash. And I said, well, look, if I come to your country and I'm trying to do work for you, then I have to respect the way you like to operate. If you like to be loose about time, I have to respect that. I said, but it goes both ways. You know, if you are trying to get business from an American company, if they say the meeting's at 10 a.m., they kind of expect you there at 10 a.m. You know,
10,
yeah, not 12, not 1. So one of the things I've had to do in my meetings in the Gulf is just schedule more breaks and just, you know, say we'll be back at one time, knowing that we'll be back a little bit later. It's just the way they are, and because I've got plenty of time built into it, then it's absolutely fine. So but in the end, you know, when you're coaching people or training people, they're asking for the same advice, which is what will give me confidence to go off and do what I need to do with the people that I'm trying to influence.
Okay, Mark, I'm going to bring Sandra in a second, because what we've talked about is at the moment quite a big corporation type scenario, and there are different flavors depending on whether it's in the US and Europe as one sort of cultural block, or as you said, sorry, was it Saudi? Did you mention? I can't quite remember what you said.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia it was. Yeah, Saudi Arabia.
Okay, but then, as we know, Sandra's owned a number of very, very successful businesses. So, Sandra, what if you were to have taken on a coach, and I know you did a lot of coaching in your role as entrepreneur, what sort of issues were you seeing, Sandra, in terms of some of the businesses that you actually ran?
Well, you know, I think one of the things that I was thinking of while you were talking, for sure, Mark, is you're talking about engineers, and the businesses that I had were definitely pretty serious type businesses because of my personality. I mean, that's what it would be more than likely. Taking away the serious aspect of it, how do you train people, whatever culture they are, and certainly in some of we had multicultural people working for us, to take away the seriousness sometimes and be able to add some humor into it at the right places to level out the stress.
Great question.
How do you do that? I mean, I was thinking, when you're over there, how can you?
Well, actually, funny enough, that was one of the benefits of having 3 days to work with people. It takes a day just for people to relax and not see you as a threat, and it's taken me several visits to really start to understand their culture. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, at the end of the day, really one of the things you're trying to teach anybody who's technically minded, so if anybody's out there and they're thinking about setting up their own business, you probably have some technical expertise or some creative expertise. And of course, it's people who will buy from you. So you have to make that connection on a people level. So half of the time, really, what we're doing is teaching people to be a little bit more conversational. To take time to understand and get to know and respect the person opposite them, but get the balance right between being confident and assertive, but not overbearing or just playing so technical that it's just boring. So it is very much about trying to humanize them. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, is there one technique that you could ever train a business in, or leaders, if you will, to help do that?
Sean and Sean will know what I'm going to mention here, but both Sean and I are trained in a thing that actually comes from the US, which is called Social Styles. And I think it's owned by a company over there called Tracom, I think, are the other company who do it. But that's a wonderful sort of psychological tool that helps to differentiate different communication styles. And what's really fascinating about that process is that you start off by learning about what your own preferences are. And of course, we all see the world through our own eyes, so we just expect people to be the way we are. And then you discover that some people like a lot more detail than you, and some people like a lot less detail. Some people want you to get straight to the point. Some people need to be warmed up a little bit first, and they won't do business with you until they know you as a person. And so the social styles model is brilliant at helping you not to put labels on people, it sounds like you do, but actually just to recognize through their body language their preferences. So it's about paying attention to the other person. If there's one tip in a general sense about communication, it's just pay attention. Notice what they like and try to give them a bit more of that, so that their subconscious mind, below the level of their conscious mind, it's not noticeable that you're very different to me. So it's about being similar to them in a communication style without mimicking them. It's not about mimicking.
Mark, I'm jumping in because I'm really excited by Sandra's question, in the sense that Sandra obviously had some very, very successful businesses. Some of our audience have got very successful businesses. They may not be big corporate, but who cares? You know, often those are more successful businesses and more personable. So I'm going to invite maybe Sandra to throw in just generally the type of scenario that, don't go into the details, Sandra, about whether you found it easy to solve or not, but what were the sort of situations that you found that were most opposite to you in terms of style? And then maybe we can have a debate about what principles Mark would train and coach on if that remained irresolvable, and then perhaps our audience can then think, hey, that might work for me, so we can kind of bring it into the audience and some of the debates and concerns that they might have. So Sandra, thinking about your own style and your own comfort zones and who you are as a person, who were the sort of people and what were the scenarios that you found most annoying and antagonistic?
That there were two opposites. I mean, two businesses that I had. One was nothing. There was just myself and my office manager who were females. The other 28 employees were males because of the type of business. Another business that I then went to after that eventually was nothing but females and only one male. And so right there is a diametrically opposed situation. I had to be able to relate in some way to each of those, and also enable the employees to relate amongst themselves better. I found, gee, how do you say this delicately? When I was working, you know, me as a female working with females was the most difficult for me.
Right.
Working with the males was less difficult, but the interaction between themselves I had to work with. So, boy, it would have been nice to have had you around for some of that, because it was very, very difficult at times. And it's pulling yourself away, certainly. And, you know, I'd like to see how you do something like that. Because there are going to be a lot of businesses. And for instance, a woman in a man's field as a leader is very, very difficult. I mean, that for me was it was atrocious in the beginning, because I would have men come up and they would challenge me all the time, including vendors, and they would say, "Well, you don't know what you're doing."
Sorry, Sandra. So just to clarify, was it a gender issue in the sense that you got these guys who are stupidly patronizing you, or regardless of gender? Was it personality type, so whether they'd been male or female, they'd have been just as much of a pain in the butt, or was it something else, do you think?
Personally, I think it's probably the way we're trained as growing up, you know, the sexes against the sexes, perhaps. Guys learn to dance a different dance among themselves as females learn to dance a different dance in the way they communicate. So I didn't understand that, and was I supposed to? I guess that's the biggest issue. I mean, that would be my question. How would you address that if you were in a conference, if you were a training session, and somebody like me said, "Look, I'm in charge of this business. I'm in charge of this group. They're all male. I'm female. I don't know how to communicate in the male congregation."
That's a great. Mark, what do you think, my friend?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, undoubtedly, it's a huge challenge, and I think just on a bigger level, sort of moving away from the genders and just making it more. Because you can, maybe not quite as acutely as your experience, but you can get similar things with different ages, with people who've been involved in an organization a long time, and then some new blood comes along. I think it's a challenge for any leader to try and win people over. And I mean, in the end, it's about respect. But I think respect is a two-way street. So the leader definitely has to earn respect. But equally, the more that you can create a common sense of identity amongst the people that you've got. So one of the things we look at in training, and there's a very well-established model for how teams develop, and they go through these 3 or 4 different stages. So recognizing where a team is at, and quite often a newly formed team, or a team where a new leader has come in, is very much like a very young child. It's full of enthusiasm, and it might even have some sense of knowing what it's doing. But because there's a new leader there, it's still looking for a sense of direction. So sometimes it's almost counterintuitive. But in those early stages, you need to be quite directive with people. They need to know. It's like they need to learn the boundaries, and they'll keep pushing the boundaries. And maybe, Sandra, that was some of the experiences that you unfortunately had. Was people like our children pushing the boundaries, looking to find, what they can get away with, and yet at the same time not wanting to take any responsibility for making decisions. And as the group goes through that journey, then eventually they can earn trust, your trust, and you can start giving them more and more responsibility. But I think you have to be upfront with people. I think you have to enlist their support in doing it, and I think you have to be ruthless with those if you're in a position to do so. I think you have to be ruthless with those who are not interested in coming along on the journey. I think you give them every chance, but then you have to be quite decisive about how you move forward. You've got to find those people who are with you and give everybody else a chance to come on board. But if it's your business, at some point you've got some tough decisions to make, and quite often that's the bit that people find really hard. Is that sometimes.
And I can tell you, for me, I mean, I totally agree with you. That was the most difficult, because as a mom and a wife, this was the first time I had encountered something like that, where all of a sudden I had to be very, very strong, or else it's like the survival of the fittest, if you will. Mm-hmm. I realized I had to do that, but in a kind but firm way. So. Yeah. It would have been nice to have known you then. That's what I'm saying, because there are many people that are going to experience the same thing. So what you're doing, and I like the way that you said ruthless, because sometimes that's how I felt.
Yes.
And that was hard.
And it's interesting. Sorry, Sean. Because especially, and this might not have been the situation for yourself, but for many people, you can find yourself promoted to leading a group of people who up until that moment have been your friends, close work colleagues. And that might not be true for so many of our audience today, but that's an even bigger challenge, to step out from a group and become the leader. You really, I think when you accept the role of leader, or you take on the responsibility of leading other people, whether that be in your business or somebody else's business, you have to some extent put what's right for the business alongside what's right for the people, and hopefully you get a synergy and it all moves forward together. I noticed there's a comment on there.
Well, that's what I wanted to pull up, actually. If you can, somebody's already put it up. So, well, Mark, you read that out. Well, actually, no, you read it out and answer it. It's asking a bit much. So I'll read it out. I've been looking at this comment, and thank you very much, Kevin. Really, really appreciate this comment, because it really informs the discussion we're having. So Kevin asks, what do you do when you've got a batch of folks that get along with each other fabulously for various reasons, and then you sense they don't seem to give a hoot about you, what you're about, and what you can bring to the table? You can actually feel it. It's palpable. Now, Kevin then goes on to say he considers these types to perhaps have a very low EQ in terms of emotional quotient, that though they may and often do have a very high IQ. So what would you say to that, Mark?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues there. The first one is, and I think this might be something that we talked about on the last hangout that we did together. The only thing that's real in the room is the behavior that you observe. What goes on in people's heads is one thing. What they say when you're not there might be a different thing. All you can judge is what you see. So for Kevin or anybody else in that situation as a coach, the first thing I'd be saying is, what is it you're noticing? What are the behaviors? And start writing those behaviors down, and start thinking about how you feel about it. You can start with a fresh piece of paper then. You can sit down with people and say, let's set some ground rules around how we're going to work. And you can bring in things like respect and treating people with respect, listening to people, and that works in two ways. One, hopefully you allow those people to contribute to it, so it's not you imposing rules; it's a shared thing, and then you can hopefully that takes you forward in a positive direction. Of course, the flip side. So that's the leadership bit. The management bit is, if they don't live up to those standards, then you've got something that you can use against them. So you can turn around and say, do you remember we said that we would do X, Y, and Z? Here's some things that I've noticed.
Okay.
On this occasion, and we're talking behaviors then, not opinions, feelings, which are what we take from that. So really the first thing I would say is start paying attention Is it real? If it's real, what is the behavior that's telling you? And is that an overreaction on your part? Are you being oversensitive? Or is it genuinely that people, because ultimately it's behaviors that have a negative impact for your business. That's the important thing in management anyway. Sorry, Sean.
No, I interrupted you. My apologies. Kevin, a brilliant question, actually.
Yeah.
The follow-up question I had to that, Mark, is, okay, so I don't know the context of this, Kevin, and you may or may not want to give us more information on that, but what Mark, the first step, so that's kind of the lovely theory, and that's great advice, but the first step is to actually get into a situation where you can set that up as a process. Yeah. So let's say, I'm not saying this is Kevin's particular situation, but I've been in a situation where I was new as a manager to a team, and they had their own nuances and way they worked. And obviously I had the authority the title of leadership, but I hadn't earned the right to have that authority. So I had to approach them in a certain way, and luckily the way I did it worked. But what if actually setting your stall out and getting to that situation where you can set a contract together proves a problem? What advice would you give to somebody to set that out in the first place? How should they go about it? So we've talked about what you should do, but what's the first step? That would be a better way of putting it.
Well, something I've done myself, and I've coached other people to do when you're leading a group of people. So let's just say you come into a situation. It may be dysfunctional, it may not be. It doesn't really matter. So you can do it in either situation. A good exercise to do with people when you first become their leader, or as soon as you're aware that things are not working, is to get the group together and include yourself as part of that group rather than somebody apart from it, and ask them to think about teams that they've been a part of in the past.
Right.
And when they've been in good teams, what makes it good? Nice. And what you'll get from that are aspirational behaviors and also some insight into what they like as a team, or what the individuals like, what tells them that it's good. It could be anything: feeling valued, a sense of fun. It could be having lots of fun. It could be many, many things. And then you also do a contrastive analysis, and then say, okay, now tell me the things. Think about a team that you've been in that didn't work. What made it bad? And invariably, those behaviours are the opposites of the things that make people.
Of course.
So and then what happens is you say, right, well, let's put those together and let's agree how we want to behave to try and make a team that everybody wants to be a part of. And if everybody's contributed to that, it's not my charter, it's our charter.
It's the team's charter.
And I can still hold people accountable to it, and the team will hold people accountable to it. Because when people start treating people in a meeting, for instance, with disrespect, you can just remind people and say, do you remember we said it was important to treat people with respect? So now, as a manager or as a leader, I've got a process to hide behind, rather than it just being about me not liking you and you not liking
Lovely.
me.
Love that. I love that. And what I really love about that is exactly as you said, Mark. What's happened is you can call people out now, because it's not you as the manager saying it, it's what the team has said is their charter. So I'm just going to put another quick comment up, and then I'm going to invite Sandra to come in with some thoughts on that. Just really reinforcing the fact that we all enjoyed Kevin's question. Sheila Hensley, good question. Kevin, nicely worded. So I'm glad you got some value out of that as well. And it was very well put. So thanks to the both of you there. That's cool. So Sandra,
before Sandra comes in, can I just check? Does everybody know what EQ is? Are we assuming that everybody knows what emotional intelligence is?
I probably made the assumption. Mark, do you want to define it for us then?
Yeah. Well, it's a book by Daniel Goleman. It's basically how we are aware of and manage our emotions, and how we are aware of and respond to the emotions of other people around us. And in his book, Daniel Goleman showed lots of evidence that people who go on to be very successful leaders, it's not about high IQ. If you have a high IQ, it's obviously an advantage. Right. But if you don't have the social skills and you don't have the awareness of how your own emotional state interacts with other people, then that's a house of cards that can come falling down. So apologies for cutting in there. I just wanted to make sure that people knew what we were talking about.
Yeah, Mark, you cut in because you've got very low EQ, and clearly you weren't at all boosted at delicate sensibilities there, Mark. So,
no, truth is, Sean, I really don't care.
We need a bit of fun here because we're all getting very, very serious now, aren't we? And it is a serious subject, but let's inject the fact that it can be very fun as well. Because I know, as a trainer, Mark, and a coach, you're a fun guy as well. Sandra, this is going to actually to demonstrate my very low EQ again. Just when I said I was going to bring Sandra in, Kevin's put another qualification on the question, and also thanks, Kristen. Great to see you here, Kristen. Really appreciate it. Kristen's just reinforced Kevin's earlier question, so thanks for that, Kevin. Let me read this one, and I'll also have to go on to some additional stuff Kevin's written. So Kevin's speaking from a position where you do not have management authority, and that's an interesting one. So it's not so you're a peer, but you don't necessarily have a position of perceived authority. So you don't have management authority over these people. You can't use force or counselling type of leverage. And people from other companies, departments, where they're at a supposedly higher level than you, and I just got across to the rest of it, and they're given the title of leader, etc., completely abuse their position. So Kevin describes a situation where he hasn't got the perceived positional authority, or that's how I take it, and those that are in a position of authority potentially abuse their position. Now Kevin then goes on to say he's been able to change these folks to a minor degree, but most carry on without changing their behaviour. And I'm going to use Kevin's vernacular here because I think it's great. They don't give a rat's patootie. And if I haven't read that properly, Kevin, it's because of my eyesight. I'm getting old. I'm getting old. I can't read. They don't give a rat's patootie about things that we know make sense in terms of doing things smartly and with real leadership skills. Now that's a real situation. So we've sort of debated a nice leadership situation, but this is real, isn't it? This is what happens in the workplace every day. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah. So the trick, and it's not easy, but the trick is to find what is important to them, and to latch on the behaviours that you want to encourage in the team as a means of delivering more of what they want. So if they don't see any value in those behaviours from their point of view, there's two ways of looking at it. What happens if we don't do those behaviours? You might not get the performance levels you're looking for. You might not get the engagement levels. So that's the sort of negative aspect. Or, look, if we do it this way, more people will enjoy working here, we'll get better productivity. And to do that, you have to spend time getting to understand those people a little bit and find out what it is that they are interested in.
Mark, I'm going to be devil's advocate here, okay? I'm really going to push this. And this may have not been Kevin's intention, but I'm going to really push it to the real world. It is so much harder, wouldn't you say, to do that if you're not in a position of authority. And let's crank this up, and this may not have been Kevin's intention at all, but imagine you're new to that team. So I'm not in a position of authority, and maybe I've changed my functional role, and I come into a team, I observe the fact that they're not performing at a high level, and I'm not even comfortable being one of their workmates, perhaps. Not saying that's what Kevin intended, but I'm just cranking it up a bit. So you can't go in from a position of authority, because you don't have that, and they don't perceive that you do. You don't respect the leadership, maybe, not because they're necessarily bad leaders, but they haven't seen this as an issue. How do I, as Sean, or how does Kevin, or how does Kristen, or how does Sheila, or whoever else, deal with a situation there? Because it's okay to talk about building rapport, but what do you practically do? And then I'm going to invite Sandra in as well to get her sense as a business owner in the past as to what she would have done.
Well, I think if I understand what you're asking, Sean, the way I hear it, so please tell me if I've got it wrong. We're dealing with somebody who's operating at two different circles. All right, so there's the circle that I'm operating within, where maybe I do have some people who report to me, or I'm part of a team. All right, and then there's maybe my boss and the more senior people who don't give a patootie. Whatever.
I'm laughing. Sheila's just.
I love that word. I don't know what it is.
Patootie's in my vocabulary now. I don't know what it is. I'm going to use it every day. Love that. That's my.
But they don't care.
Sorry.
They don't care about us.
Right.
What I would say is, if you ignore them and you become good at what you do, and your team and your colleagues become good at what you do, they will start to take notice.
Cool.
So don't waste your time. Listen, if they can't be bothered and they don't show you respect, then I would say don't fight that battle that way. Find a different way. Go and do it your own way. Do what you believe in. Show them you're right, and they will start listening to you. And I'll give you a great example, a true story, Sean, a true story. When I was a sales manager, I remember going to a conference, and this is the typical thing that them up there, you'll remember this sort of thing. I was at a conference, and we ended up arguing over an hour on the agenda. We had an afternoon's activity that was organised. They thought they were doing everybody a favour, but it was an organised activity. So from everybody else's point of view, it was company time. But from their point of view, it was a leisure activity. But it wasn't optional. And that started at 3 o'clock, and lunch finished at 2 o'clock. So we had an argument. So the MD came to us and said, well, you know, what should we do for that hour? And we said, well, why don't you just give people the hour off? And he said, well, I'm paying for everybody to come to this conference. Why the hell should I give them the hour off? They're going to have the rest of the afternoon off. And we realised it didn't matter what we said. He wasn't going to change his opinion about that. And we kept trying to argue the case that if you give people the hour off, then you'll get more of this. And he kept coming back to us and saying, prove it. Prove it. So in the end, I said to him, I remember saying to him, look, I can't prove that you'll get more positive stuff, but I'll make you a promise. When you get the feedback after the conference, if you don't do it, everybody will turn around and say, why the hell didn't you give us more time off?
Of course.
And he thought about it for a few minutes, and he went, okay. Now, I don't know what convinced him, but, you know, he was one of those people who was more motivated to move away from bad things than he was towards good things. And I'd never realised that about him. And every time after that I wanted to do something, I told him how it would be worse if we didn't do it. Then it would be better if we did. Same argument, different perspective.
Which brings us back to the language side of things. So sometimes it's not just about what you say, but it's how you say it and how you do that within the filters and model of the world that person has. Now, Sandra's been very, very good because Sandra has had some mega businesses. I know that, and many people that follow Sandra know that she's done an enormous amount of things. So everything that we just said in the last 5 or 10 minutes, Kevin's question, Sandra, the feedback from Sheila and Kristen, the fact that you sometimes have this conflict and you don't have the luxury of positional power, for want of a better way of putting it, over the other people that you're working with. Does that resonate with you in any respect? And what is your thinking here?
Well,
big question.
That's a lot of questions.
17 questions in one there.
Yeah. You know, you can go back to when you were under someone else, or, you know, my businesses, obviously I was always the one in charge.
Of course.
But the interesting thing is, even when you're in charge, are you really in charge? And that's the thing that I used to always say to myself and to other people. I'm not really in charge, because if we're working as a team, I'm still a team member. And then I go back to what you were saying, Mark, about the emotional side, the what was that called again? The
Patootie.
Thank you.
Well, the
Patootie.
Right, and you know, Sean and I were talking about this recently. How much of what is going on when you're having conflict is because of the emotional, psychological projection of what is going on with the other person, and has nothing to do with the event, the situation, and other people around them. And being able to recognize that, and that's not always through body language, it's through many other things. And so when do we as leaders go into and say, okay, how much is this is from projection, or is it all from projection? How do you teach that in your side? Because many times we get frustrated, we get negative, we get this, we get that, because it's internal within us. And then if I'm able to recognize that as a leader, perhaps it does boil down a lot to the way I respond. And think about when somebody says to you, don't forget to do this, versus, will you remember to do this?
Yeah.
Right.
And how does that change things around then? And I mean, I know I'm bringing a lot in here, but Sean asked me to, so.
And you did.
So now I'm going to put it back to Mark.
Marky, what do you think, my friend?
Yeah, so, again, I just go back to what I said earlier. It's about, in the end, it's about asking the right questions, that's obvious. But bring it back to behaviour, because the only thing that's real between you and I is what you and I see. So if or hear or observe through our senses. So if you're getting a lot of projection, you'll get a lot. If you're getting a lot of hurt feelings, you've got to be boring and take the emotion out of it. You can't respond emotionally because then you get this sort of rising tension. And you've got to be really boring, and you've got to, almost counsel them and sort of say, okay, I understand you're upset. What is it that's going on here that's making you feel that way? And notice the choice of words. What is happening that is making you feel that way? Because that is a very clever way of saying to people, why do you feel that way? But because most of us remember when our parents and teachers spoke to us and said, why, we feel quite threatened or challenged when we hear that question. So one of the things I teach is you don't use the question why, replace it with what made you or makes you, because that presupposes some outside force came in and imposed its will on you. And funnily enough, people find that easier to accept than take responsibility for their own actions. So I would always...
Okay. Sorry, just to, no, I interrupted you again because I do that, and I've got a very low EQ, as you both know. But just to really be clear on that before we go on to the next bit, and I'm sorry about this, Mark. Okay. So what you're saying is the very use of the word why, just that one word, can sometimes cause a huge defensive reaction and response. So what you're advocating is don't use the word why if you don't want to escalate the tension. That would be what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you need to ask the question why, because the question why challenges our thinking at our beliefs level. So what Sandra was describing in the end is about my beliefs about the situation. Beliefs are not necessarily facts. They're my interpretation of facts. So if I go back to what is facts and say, so if I turn around, if somebody turns around to you with hurt feelings and says, you've never liked me, that's quite an extreme thing, a huge generalization. Just going back to them and saying, well, why do you think that, could feel quite challenging, and it ups the emotional ante and builds up tension. But if you just turn around and said, firstly, notice the acknowledgement.
Yes.
I'm sorry that's how you feel. What is it that I've done that makes you makes you think that? Then the person has to go inside and come back with concrete examples, rather than vague hurt feelings, which is very easy to do. So I think, and the fact that you're not being defensive and dismissive hopefully keeps the relationship going. So if you genuinely want the things to move on, try to be neutral. And this is something that we teach people in counseling skills, for therapy, I guess they call it in the States. But that sort of counseling skills is about remaining neutral, keeping the emotion out of it, but getting to the heart of what the real issue is.
So I'm just going to pull a comment up from Sheila actually in a second, but basically, always do this. Let's blue box my amazing backlit, incredible room here. But yeah, so what you're saying basically is it's almost like a sense of respect in itself, because you don't necessarily agree with their response, but you acknowledge it in a way that doesn't increase the tension levels. And once you've done that, then it's easier to deal with. And I guess thinking of myself, I know one of my challenges sometimes in managerial positions I've had is that inwardly I can be seething. I could just be thinking, why the bloody hell? There you go, Sandra. I did say bloody hell, and I managed to work that in just for you. Have we got the comment on the screen? No, we haven't. But why on earth can they not see this? And I do this thing called facial leakage. I don't know if anyone's heard it. So sometimes, I'm probably doing it now, but what I'm thinking leaks out into my face. So I'm not very good at keeping the impassive Spock-like impassivity, but what happens if I'm feeling a bit tense, it shows. I know it's a bit of a digression, but what I love in what you said, Mark, to bring it back to that, is by using certain words, you can bring the situation out, examine it, and do it in a way that doesn't escalate the whole problem in the first place. Not always easy to do, but I love your answer. So thanks for that. Oh, sorry, Mark.
No, just to summarise that, you separate the person from the problem. Separate the person from the behaviour. Okay. Try not to judge the person. Try to get back to the behaviour. But if you think that's me being solved, the flip side of that is I would, if people can't give me concrete examples, I'm going to turn around and say, you need to have a think about where you're coming from here, because you've not been able to give any concrete examples. So, you have to have a think that some of this is more about you than it is about me or about us. So it's always, it's not about, you know, it is about bringing people with you, but it's always about getting to the heart of the matter. And where you identify that they are the problem, you need to be quite clear and have a clear idea about what your strategy is. If they're really important to you and you want to hang on to them, then do everything you can to hang on to them. If not, bin them.
Marky, thank you for that. I'm just going to call out Cheryl. Cheryl Deuce has just entered the building. Cheryl Deuce has entered the building. Cheryl, better late than never, Cheryl says. Thanks for coming. I know you've been really busy. Funnily enough, Cheryl, we're going to do Smash and Trash in a minute, so you have really hit the mark perfectly. But there is a comment that I'm going to read. Well, actually, Sandra, do you want to read this one out?
Sure. I own my own. Excuse me. I own.
Nicely done.
Which one did I pull?
There we go. All perfectly rehearsed, everybody. All
I'm hoping that this is the one that you said. I own my own company, and Sandra's right. Hard to discern what the real problem is, so we can deal with it properly and effectively. By Sheila Hensley.
Yeah, and I guess we can. I don't want to put my own interpretation on that, but I will, because that's what I do. But I guess it reinforces what you said, Sandra. I think it was certainly for me, and I may have got this wrong, but clearly, Sandra, you owned a lot of your businesses, and you can kind of analyse the problem, and you're in that position of authority in that it's your business. But you raised a good point earlier, Sandra, that just because you own the business doesn't mean there won't be any conflict, and people don't necessarily always give you that respect. So there's a lot of stuff wrapped up in there, which is really, really cool. And actually so cool that Sheila's reinforced it by saying bloody hell patootie. So we know we've hit the patootie gradient of management excellence there, which is a good thing.
Very good.
I'm getting so used to the comment tracker now. I'm getting really excited that I can actually do it and then switch them off. So I've got to pull up another one. And
we can tell you're excited, Sean, by your facial leakage.
Facial leakage, it's my thing. Kevin again, our good friend Kevin. Mark is demonstrating how to avoid the other person from escalating the emotion. They've got something on it, whatever it is. That's a good point, whatever it is, because we don't always know. And yes, Sean Mahon needs to work on his EQ. Winks. Thanks, Kevin. I take that in the spirit it was intended, and you're making me laugh. So thanks, my good friend. That's really cool. So some great comments. I'm sorry, Sandra, please.
Could I ask Mark a question? The one thing that I found, Mark, for me that was the most helpful in business and continues to be the most helpful is my training in psychology. And when I got to business, I have to say, as much as I disliked psychology when I was involved in it and so forth, I found it the most helpful in business. What do you think, if someone is out there listening and wants to add something to their education, if you will, or their know-how to run a business, I think it would be something in the working of the mind personality. But what would you say?
No, I'd absolutely agree. And I like keeping it simple. So there are one or two psychological models, that sounds very grandiose, that are very easy to understand and that really help me. So within NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, there's a particular model called logical levels. You can go and look that up on Google. That's brilliant.
Just say it again, Mark. Can you just say it again, just in case?
Yeah, it's called logical levels or logical levels of change, sometimes by Robert Dilts, and that is brilliant. That helps. That's where that questioning coming into, asking the right question comes in. The other one, which relates to what we were just talking about earlier about this, keeping the emotion out of it, is transactional analysis. TA by Eric Byrne was the original guy. He died in the early 70s, but he wrote a brilliant book called Games People Play.
Nice.
American therapist, absolutely brilliant. And he was the one who coined this idea of parent, adult, child ego state. And often when you get conflict, what you've got is the inner child coming out and either appealing or pushing back against the parent, and it provokes a parental response in the manager leader. What you have to do is be boring adult, take the emotion out. Emotion sits in the parent and the child. There's a great place for it. Fun sits there as well, but in work and in work relationships in particular, keep it boring, keep it adult, get down to the facts, and so TA, transactional analysis, Eric Byrne, and logical levels are what I build most of my coaching in terms of a psychology bit around that. Old stuff, but it's still proven to work.
Does that help, Sandra? Does that sort of address what?
No, I think that I think that's great for people, and it's something that they can do without taking away from their time as running a business and so forth. They can do it, afterwards, during a little bit of whatever, and not put out a huge amount of dollars.
Yeah.
For small business, I think that's an essential thing to know what they can do to improve their leadership skills and their ownership management skills, and still maintain their sanity.
That's thank you for doing that, Sandra, because that's a real nugget. We're not always talking about, we've not always got the luxury of big corporate training budgets, and what you were saying, and sometimes when you're a business owner, you're in the business, aren't you? For heaven's sake, you've got 101 or 1,001 things to worry about, so it's difficult to have that detachment or think of taking on the coaching mode. So what Mark's just shared with us is something that you can do. Like you said, Sandra, it's not something that costs a lot of dollars to do, where you don't have the training budget, and it's very implementable. Now, I've got a big note here, a big flashing thing that says, Sean, remember your EQ, remember your EQ. So I'm looking at that as it flashes red. And on the other side, something says smash and trash, smash and trash. So we're just we're just going to change the mode a little bit, guys. This has been a great conversation. I'm really enjoying it. And just to move it up to a different level before we kind of close, because I'm conscious of the fact we've only got about 10, 15 minutes left, we're going to do smash and trash. Now, Mark, after that, I know you're going to share with us the 3 golden rules that you spoke about. So we mustn't forget that. But the smash and trash, for those of you who have not seen it, seen the show before, is, well, God, Sean, what are you doing? This is dreadful. Let me just let me talk and try and do something at the same time, which I'm not always very good at. But let me just double check. Here we go. Smash and trash, everybody. Yay! Smash and trash, smash. For those of you who've not seen the show before, that is me in my William Shatner, Captain Kirk uniform, because I'm big Trekkie, and you recognise the big old eyes there, I'm sure. So that is me. I'll just put that off. But smash and trash. How many times I've said that without telling you what it is? Let's tell you what it is, for God's sakes. Smash and trash is what has really blown your world, what's been fantastic, what have you enjoyed this week? And I always ask all my guests that, and obviously Sandra will share, Mark will share, and I'll share. And the trash thing is it's not an earth-shattering trash. This is a big tragedy, but what could we do without? What's perhaps not been the best thing of our week, and it just injects a different bit of energy. And we'll take the trash first. I'm going to ask good old Mark for his trash first. So, Marky, what's your trash of the week, my friend?
Yeah, well, my 2 are related. So when we come back to do the smash, I'll have to reiterate what it was. But for the trash, I'm trashing my old video cameras, even my HD ones. Don't need them anymore.
And why is that, Marky?
Well, I can't. You have to wait until I tell you what my smash is.
Oh. Okay. EQ, boom.
I'm just keeping people hanging on for another 5 minutes.
You are. That's suspense. That is. It's not fair. Okay. So that's your trash.
Yeah, get rid of the video camera. Yeah.
Okay. And now we're all in suspense, Mark. I dare say the comment track is going to be full of but why? But why? So what's your smash?
Oh, you want my smash? Sorry, I was just reading Cheryl Deuce's comment. My favourite part of the show. Sorry. Yeah, so why am I getting rid of my video camera? Well, I do a lot of coaching. I do a lot of presentation skills training, which requires me to do videoing. And I discovered this myself anyway, but there's a gentleman, an American gentleman called James Wedmore, and who came into my inbox, and I followed the link, and it's one of these books you can download about using your iPhone for video camera. And I have to say, the quality on the iPhone 5, I'm not advertising Apple, I apologise, despite the fact that there's an Apple logo in the background. This is my office. This is my office I take with me. So I don't need my video camera anymore. I get better quality video with this. And his website is full of useful tips and equipment that you can get, which helps to make a professional job of that. So I don't need my big video camera anymore.
Right.
I've got I've got my iPhone and Dropbox for sending videos.
Got his iPhone and Dropbox. There we go. Actually, Jennifer, I'm just going to put this up, and then I'm going to invite Sandra in. But yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a more serious one. But yeah, smash USA, USA, USA. Absolutely, big smash. ISIS, yeah. Well, in fact, I probably should have done it the other way around to leave it on a positive. But ISIS tearing up Iraq, trash. Totally agree with that. Well said, Jennifer. So, Sandra, you're looking. I know you love this bit. You absolutely love this bit. You never can wait to tell us your smash and trash. So, Sandra, starting with the trash, what would that be?
It's really called Crash.
Crash, crash, trash.
C-R-A-S-H. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to give a name. It's called Camtasia. I was just delighted about buying this software. I love it. I have been testing it out over 2 years. I could hardly wait to finally get it. I've had it for 2 weeks, and it does nothing but crash, crash, crash. And so I have not been a happy camper. Now, my smash is I also got it to work for doing video capture of video chats.
Ooh.
So I got it to capture finally, good audio, but it still crashes afterwards.
Oh.
So I have the crash and I have the smash with it, all combined still. I'll tell you the end, how it works out next week, because I'm going to put a phone call into them and see if they talk.
Which, by the way, and I've just realised I haven't got my lower third up, so let's see if I can actually talk, breathe, and put a lower third up, which I'm not sure I can do all three of those things, but I'm a
Which one are you going to give up first, Sean?
I'll hold my breath, Mark. I'll hold my breath.
How do you talk if you hold your breath, Sean?
Not easy, guys. Not easy, but I'll manage somehow. Actually, Sandra, what you've done there very cleverly as well, which is just an example of how good you are, is you've left the story slightly hanging. So I love that technique, because we'll all be eager to hear how it concludes next week. But my trash, and I've got to put my very sober face on, which probably I have had for the last hour anyway. But my trash.
For the last hour, Sean.
Yeah, it's quite unusual, isn't it? Don't give people the wrong impression, Mark. But my trash is soccer. Oh no, soccer. Now, actually, it's good news, because the US. Continued. Well, I know the US have only played one game in the World Cup so far, but you guys are still doing an awesome job. But we didn't do quite as good a job. We didn't have a bad play today, Mark. And Mark's the big soccer fan, aren't you? Mark's shaking his head there. But I have to say, pretty upsetting that. And my nails have gone, that England playing against Uruguay were not doing fantastically well in the first half. In fact, we were a goal down, and I had that sort of emotion. This is a real trash where, oh my God, you know, what's happening, national pride, all the rest of it. And in the second half, we seemed to redeem ourselves, which was good, scored a goal, so we'd equalised, etc. And I'm conscious that this isn't a football programme, but it really got to me. And then again, sadly, we were kicked down when Uruguay scored a second goal. So my trash is the highs and the lows of emotion that come through sport, whether that sport is soccer, football, baseball, whatever it is. We all know some of the highs and the lows. So a bit of a trash moment, but just because of England's performance. Let's hope we can redeem ourselves a little bit later. Now, after everyone's fallen supine into a heap, having heard that very long trash, my smash is that I absolutely love. I love so many American TV series, but one of my favourites is True Blood, which is actually, I probably said it totally the wrong way. It should be True Blood, but I said True Blood. That's me being from the UK. So True Blood, I think, is in its final season, and I read somewhere, I think it was the New York Times, that the lead actor, who's actually a Brit, Stephen Moyer, who plays the vampire Bill with a Louisiana Civil War type accent, Stephen Moyer has decided that he's going to do a musical, and he's put a big pitch to do a musical on Broadway with True Blood. Now, Sandra knows from the ABC, Sandra's show that I co-host with her, that I cannot sing for any amount of candy. I'm absolutely useless. But it just occurred to me. It just occurred to me. I just imagine Vampire Bill coming in and saying, "I am going to bite your neck," and Suki Stackhouse singing backwards. I just can't conceive of a True Blood musical. It just made me laugh, and it's a smash because it made me laugh. So really cool. So that was my smash. That was my trash. It only took about 10 minutes, but that's me. Somebody's put a comment up. So. Right, Cheryl, can I chew gum? I can. Can I chew gum, talk, and think? Probably not. I'm not a great multitasker, but I can chew gum, Cheryl. So thanks for that. I really appreciate it. I'm not going to give you a demonstration, but because it would be too much. But we've done a smash and trash, guys. Thank you for that. Really enjoyed that. Back to the leadership and coaching. Mark, you did promise us something, sir. You did promise us the 3 golden rules. So I'm wondering if you can share those with us.
Yep, and I have to say that these are not my golden rules, and they are taken from Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And for me, most people who are struggling to get their business off the ground or are struggling in their first managerial role, which can often be very, very similar kinds of tensions. 3 things that will help in any situation. Firstly, prioritize your activities. Right. And Covey in his book talks about getting the balance right. Look at how urgent a task is and how important it is, and focus your attention on the ones that are most urgent and most important, and ignore the ones that are neither urgent nor important. So prioritize, and of those tasks, the second rule is where you can delegate. I think that's very challenging for people who started their own business, brought other people in, to start letting go and trusting people to be able to do tasks for them will allow you to focus on those urgent and important tasks. And the third one is learn to say no. Most people who are low in assertive or don't wish to get into conflict struggle to say no. So prioritize, delegate, and learn to say no. They're the 3 golden rules that Stephen Covey shared around, and I've just adapted them to say I think actually that's true for anybody who's running their own business or leading a team. Get those 3 things right, your life will be a lot more comfortable.
I love that, Mark. I think that's very, very simple, but there's a lot of deep truth in there. So again, I know you've just recapped, but focus your attention, i.e. prioritize, delegate where you can, and learn to say no. And I just think of my first managerial roles, I kind of felt the compulsion, maybe because I didn't understand all of the tasks myself. I found it very difficult to delegate because I didn't know how to delegate, and in the end that raised my stress levels to such a degree that it was counterproductive and affected the dynamic of the team. So until I got better at delegating, we weren't as effective a team as we could have been, which was my issue, not the team's issue. So that resonated with me particularly well. And learn to say no. I think that's so important. Sometimes people might want to get involved in everything. They might have a desire or a fear that by not getting involved, they're being rude, but they're not serving themselves well or the people that they work with. I've just seen another comment flick up, Mark. So. Right, so can I sing what I've just said? Well, I shall try. Kevin Burns, I shall try.
If William Shatner could do it, Sean, you could.
Yeah, and my icon. If Shatner can sing in the loosest sense of the words, then. So all good stuff. Well, we are sadly coming to the close of the show, and really, Kristen, love to get some Covey. I'm never quite sure if it's Stephen Covey or Stephen Covey. So
it's Covey, I think they pronounce it. Yeah.
But Kristen, love me some Covey. So thanks, Kristen, and actually, Kristen, because it's such a good comment, we've got to have the woo as well. Woo. So I had to put that in. But thanks, Kristen. Really appreciate that. Okay, closing moments of the show, sadly. By the way, Sandra, did any of what Mark just said about those 3 things, as a business owner, the focus, delegation, and learn to say no, were those things that you did in your businesses?
Every day. And you know, I have to say, you couldn't have summarized it better. You couldn't have taken 3 things to give to people any better than that. And they're all very difficult. I think the hardest thing in business that I could ever say to anybody is try to not, if you are able to do the task, tell yourself you're not allowed to.
Hey, I like that.
Good words.
Very, very good. So say that again, Sandra, because that's blown my mind. Please say that again.
If you are able to do the task,
yeah,
if that's what the business is about, because many people start a business because it was their trade, so to speak, or their service or whatever. Don't do it. Delegate it, because that is going to be what will make the business succeed long term, is that you are not wearing yourself out. Other people are able to excel and you do work as a team that way.
I love that. Thank you for that. I'm just going to put something up from my very good friend Zara Altair. So Zara, that's lovely. Zara's just reinforced what we've said, and thanks, by the way, Sandra, for just what you've just shared. That was absolutely superb. Zara, prioritize, delegate, learn to say no, which are of course what we've just debated. So yes, for many years. Thanks, Mark. Time was I managed a team of artists. My gosh, talk about potentially temperamental and emotional people. And people that we respect. All three of us have got a huge love of the arts as well. But I can imagine you dealt with some challenging people, Zara. I should well imagine. So that's kind of interesting. And now, having done so well with the comment tracker, there you go. Look. Yeah, this is interesting. Kristen, again, bless you, Kristen. I struggle to say no. This is an interesting one. I struggle to say no because I never want to miss an opportunity to learn. What would you say in the closing moments about that, Mark?
I would just say learning, because instead of it being a learning opportunity for you directly, how about through the eyes of people, around you? So,
Mark, I can't see you, my friend. Sorry, Mark, I can't see you. I think we've still got your...
Sorry, let me get that off.
Where are you?
Sorry about that. Sorry.
As much as we like your attractive avatar, Kristen, thanks. Laugh out loud to you as well. Thank you. Mark, where is your lovely image?
It's there. Okay. It's there.
Okay, I've only got his avatar, so my apologies. I'm not losing the plot. So, Mark, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, sorry. Yeah, I had the comment on there, so I apologize. No, I think, rather than seeing it as a missed opportunity for yourself, see it as an opportunity to learn in a different way, which is learning by developing other people. It can be incredibly rewarding to see people that you trust to grow with you, and and as your business grows, go with you. And also, of course, one of the dangers for any entrepreneur is that you are too closely associated with your business, because if there ever comes a time when you want to sell it, if the only thing that people know is you can't sell it. So you've got to develop a business that stands apart from you. So I don't see it as a missed opportunity. I just see it as a different opportunity.
Okay, so we've got a nice distinction, different opportunities, not necessarily missed one. Love the point you make about as involved as you might be in a business, as much as you might love it, potentially you might also want to sell it and move on. So keep yourself. It's almost like you can be an integral part of the brand, and you maybe should be, but also have an exit strategy as well. That's kind of what I'm hearing. So that's all good. Now, I know we could talk for a lot longer, and I'm also conscious of the fact that we're now pretty much at the end of the show. So just before we ask you for contact details, Mark, and how people can engage with you further, if there was one learning point from this that came out, and probably not appropriate to ask you just yet on this, Mark, but maybe ask Sandra and then I'll share mine. What's the key learning point maybe for you, Sandra, today in today's discussion?
I like what Mark said here at the end. Take it as not a missed opportunity, but an opportunity to learn it in a different way. I think that's a great way to coin things. Even I think it's something we could do every day with things we're faced with, because many times we are asked to do things and we want to be involved in things. We want to grow. We want to learn, and we can't do everything. So that's a good thing to put in my mind.
And actually,
I like it. Thank you, Mark.
and it does touch a little bit on Kristen's. Element as well. Often we want to get involved in everything, and that's clearly something that with Kristen's level of enthusiasm, she's found. So maybe there are times when we can't do that. And we can still get involved in a different way, but we can't get hands-on with everything. I keep seeing comments coming up from Mark. Mark's loving this. So,
well, no, it's just that if you want to know what my takeaway is, it's that part. I've just put it up because it's written there. Quote of the day: "If you're able to do the task, delegate it." Absolutely, I agree. Totally beautiful, Sandra. Great quote. Captures perfectly my own philosophy. So thank you for that.
Yeah, definitely. Nicely shared, Sheila. Thanks, Mark, for sharing that. My one is it's similar. It sounds like I've just ripped off everybody else actually, but it's
Nothing
around.
new there, then, Sean.
Well, it's the privilege of going last, actually, isn't it? I can copy everybody else, but it is very much about delegation. I mean, I'm a bit like Kristen in a way, and maybe slightly assuming what Kristen meant in a sense, but I kind of like to get involved, and kind of maybe it's a security thing for me as well. By getting involved, maybe in my case, I feel I have more control as well. And I think one of my big things is to remember to just step back and make things less hassle for me by delegating more, help people develop more by trusting them to do that task. So it's good for them, it's good for me, and I've just got to get better at it. So all good, guys. Really appreciate the comments in the stream. And thanks everybody for getting really engaged. It's made all of our lives a lot easier, and it's great to see the feedback we've had in the stream. Absolutely fantastic. Zara's just added challenging. I think that was in reference to working with a group of artists. So maybe we'll explore that at a later date, Zara. But I can well imagine. Thanks to everybody. So Mark, if anybody wants to engage with you further, how could they do that, and what's the best way?
Yeah, I think before you go and spend some money on books on TA, I mean, I write a blog at markdecosemo.com, so that's my name, and you can find it on my Google Plus page. And I've written blogs over the last couple of years, and I make reference to those theories. So as a starting point to see if it interests you before you go and spend some money, just check out a couple of my old blog posts around transactional analysis or logical levels.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I mean, for those of you that don't know, clearly we're both Brits, but Mark and I go back a long way. But it wasn't for that reason I had Mark on the show. I've got a lot of professional respect for what Mark does. So your blog posts, I think, are really well written. And it's a nice point you make that people don't necessarily have to rush out and buy all these resources. You've got a nice resource section on your site. Now, I know your Google Plus profile is still a work in progress, I think, Mark, I've got to say. Yes. But certainly they can go onto the website. So shout it out again, Mark. Just remind us what it is.
It's www.markdecosemo.com.
And the final thing I'm going to ask you, and then we'll call things to a halt, is, Mark, can you tell us a little bit about tomorrow's consultant as well?
Yeah, that's the business side I've been developing, which is working specifically with doctors in the UK. We've got our first gig next week in the northeast of England, and then we've got our first weekend gig coming up in August. So that's communication and leadership and management skills specifically aimed at doctors. And it's called Tomorrow's Consultant because it's about helping doctors get to that first consultant post, which is the first leadership role. So that's what I'm working on a lot of the time at the moment.
Yeah, and just to qualify, when Mark says his first gig, he means his first gig in the context of work with doctors, but actually a lot of what Mark does takes him abroad, and you've got a really high profile, although I appreciate people in the stream may not know Mark, but you've got a high profile in terms of international coaching and things like that, so that's all good. So absolutely really appreciated having you as a guest again, Mark. If anyone wants to contact Mark, we will I'll post some additional links in the event page, and just a reminder. But Mark, I'm right in saying, as we conclude, people don't have to live in the UK. Obviously, our audience is predominantly US anyway, so they don't have to be in the UK to touch base with you. So, can people Skype you? Can people?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. The nice thing about having an unusual name like DeCosemo, and if you come across DeCosemo, it's one of my relatives. I can promise you that we haven't found anybody who isn't. Then just put Mark DeCosemo into Google, and you'll find all my contact details.
Absolutely brilliant.
You can do it with spaces or without spaces; they all come up the same. So.
That's marvellous. Thank you, Cheryl, for your comment. Thank you, Cheryl, for your comment about the show being smashing, and we did get Smash and Trash in, which is great. The one time I missed it out, there was a bit of a riot, so I'm glad that we remembered to do that. Thanks to everybody in the stream. Thank you to the inimitable Sandra Watson, who not only has shared the show with me, but has asked some absolutely killer questions. So, Sandra, many thanks. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thanks
to you guys for watching, and that's it until next Successful Socials. Really enjoyed seeing everybody. Take care. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.